Hi you all. Hi everyone. Welcome back to Karen Vibes, reading for the mature audience. Hope you're all doing okay. Alright, so it's another Sunday and we'll be doing some more reading. So we had stopped at chapter 2, yes. Alright, so let me introduce my book. Name of the book that I'll be reading is Minty Alley. So the name of the book is Minty Alley, written by C.L.R. James, and it's narrated by me, Karen. Alright, so without further ado, let us get right into it. So grab that cup of tea, grab that cool drink, and let's read on. So we're at chapter 22. So if you've been following my page, I am on YouTube, Karen Vibes, that's KarenVibes with an exclamation sign. You can find me on YouTube and you can follow my reading. So if you're new to my channel, you can follow my reading. Alright, and you can pick up where I left off. Alright, so without further ado, let us get right into the meat of the matter. Alright, so chapter 22. On All Year's Night, Miss Atwell paid Haynes a visit. She wished him profuse compliments of the season and came straight to her point. She said that she hoped he wouldn't be vexed, but she had taken it upon herself to ask him about his boarding. Mrs. Rose had not sent her, but Haynes could see how things were in the house, and if he could manage to let Mrs. Rose board him at about $20 a month, it would be of material assistance to their kind landlady. She assured him a second time that Mrs. Rose had nothing to do with her asking. Haynes told her cautiously that he had been thinking of coming to some new temporary arrangement with Mrs. Rose for some time, and at least would be glad to discuss the matter with her. It would be easier for him, and he was sure it would be easier for her also. But Ella had been his servant for so long that he would not do anything which would hurt her feelings in any way. He might perhaps board with Mrs. Rose until Ella came back. But yet, Ella is the person I am considering, Miss Atwell, he concluded. We know that, Mr. Haynes, but Ella is sick and she is gone so long. But still, you know, she may be better. I heard from a friend of hers whom she wrote that she was still pretty bad. I thought she had wrote to you to tell you, Mr. Haynes. She has not written? No, she hasn't, but she wouldn't write. Ella would have died rather than expose her writing and spelling to her master. Mrs. Rose knows that you have come to ask. So Mrs. Rose knows that you have come to ask me? Yes, admitted Miss Atwell. We was talking over the new year and how bad things looking, and I tell her I am going to speak to you. Haynes had a bad 2 minutes. The old attempt by the nurse had made him wary on the question, but the way they all flew to do anything for him. Mrs. Rose's kindness to him, the kindness of them all, his authority in the house. On the other hand, Ella's long and faithful attendance to his every wish, her trust and confidence in him. Help the poor soul, Mr. Haynes. She needs it. Miss Atwell sat motionless, her hands crossed in her lap. Her shining eyes met Haynes whenever he looked at her. Very well, Miss Atwell, said Haynes with a decision. Tell Mrs. Rose I shall start with her tomorrow. In the morning we will make arrangements. You is doing her a good turn, Mr. Haynes. God will bless you. Good night, Mr. Haynes, and sleep well. That was December 31st. Mrs. Rose and Haynes concluded arrangements on New Year's Day, and inasmuch as he had the money and boarding meant her spending, he paid her $20 in advance for January. That was January 1st. On January 4th, which was Maisie's birthday, Haynes learned that Ella was in town. She had come in on the morning of the 2nd, but by some means or other had heard that he was boarding with Mrs. Rose. How she and her set managed to be so well informed about everything which they were interested was a marvel. But heard she had, and accepting the circumstances, had not even come to see him to discuss the question. Haynes would never have known that she was back in town at all if Maisie had not told him, and told him with relish, that she heard Ella was looking well and had come back to work. Oh my goodness. And now Mrs. Rose have the work. Anyway, let's read on. Haynes waited a day or two, wishing that Ella would come and get the interview over. On the second afternoon, as soon as he reached home, he asked again, had she been? Maisie was quietly superior. No, Mr. Haynes, you ought to know Ella well enough to realize that she will not come here again. Then I shall have to go to see her and explain, said Haynes. Why bother? Haynes knew the interview would be awkward, but knew too that it had to take place. And I must stop putting off things. I'll go immediately after supper. Ella did not receive him coldly. She laughed, and he told her he was glad to see her looking so well. You're looking well too, sir, she replied. Mrs. Rose and them taking good care of you, though, sir. I hear you boarding with them, sir, and you don't want me, sir. That's why I didn't come. It isn't that I didn't want you anymore, Ella, he explained to her as best he could. When he told her that Miss Atwell had assured him that she was still ill, she rapped out, That's a lie, that's a lie. I was well before Christmas and I was coming. But everybody tell me to stop and spend Christmas, especially as I know you used to go to the country for Christmas. Ella was taking it easily, but her resentment was plain. She had stuck to him all through his mother's illness, had helped in ways for which he could never repay her. And now when she was ill, he had allowed these strangers to take him away. And yet he knew that Ella was not blaming him, but was wrath with them. Haynes said goodbye. Goodbye, sir. I'm sorry the day I ever take you to number 2, sir. I know from the first that they was going to try and get you away from me, sir. That Mrs. Rose, she don't look it, but she is a deep stricker as the rest, sir. Beware of them. People, sir, beware of them. The next 2 or 3 days were difficult ones for Haynes. The household, with remarkable sensitiveness, avoided him. Even Maisie, probably on Mrs. Rose's stringent orders. Perhaps, however, she was on some intimate affair of her own. Haynes felt that he had been had, and it was a feeling that Mrs. Rose had been concerned in some way how conspiracy against him. Sorry, let me read that again. Haynes felt that he had been had, and it was the feeling that Mrs. Rose had been concerned in some low conspiracy against him that worried him. He found himself thinking of it at meals, at work, in bed, and some of his old timidity and distrustfulness came creeping over him. The awkwardness over Ella he had been able to overcome without difficulty. But he had been fitting himself into the home life at number 2, and now this thing had come to upset him. He felt surprisingly desolate. Was all this goodwill and kindness merely to catch him? Was he a trusting, simple Simon? He did not know what to think and was surprised how much he worried over such a little thing. After all, he lived there, and there was very comfortable. They were as nice as ever. Why bother? But still, he doubted and brooded why bother? But still he doubted and brooded until, chiefly through Maisie, his doubts were resolved, or at least he worried about the matter no longer. Maisie was determined to get even with Mrs. Rose. Haynes heard Mrs. Rose say once or twice that Maisie was doing her best to pick a quarrel. He thought that the expression was only a figure of speech for Maisie's usual mischievousness. But the words were literally true, for Maisie exerted herself until she had deliberately brought about a tension. On the Sunday after New Year's Day, the quarrel broke at last. This is where it says Tori come to bump. Yes, she screamed from the alley, whither she had retired after the early exchanges. All you only have eyes for me, and all that I doing, how I bad. But God going to punish all of you for your wicked deeds. All of you take away Mr. Haynes from Ella. From the first day the gentleman come here, all of you been trying to take him away. And when you couldn't get him, all you invite him and give him a lot of food and things to drink to fool him. You lie, Ella. You lie. You lie on Ella and say she's sick. Elsie Daniel come here and I hear her tell you that she see Ella in Hastings and that Ella well and coming back. And all you lie until all you can take him away to get. And until all you take him away to get his money to spend. So this is what Maisie cussing and telling Miss Rose. So here Miss Rose answer her back now. Mrs. Rose emerged from the kitchen with a hatchet in hand. Here you now, Tori come to bump. Mrs. Rose emerged from the kitchen, hatchet in hand. I'm going to kill her this morning, she said. This is the end. Nobody tell me anything. Since that night with Ben and the knife, Haynes had always treated Mrs. Rose with a measure of seriousness. He did not wait for Miss Atwell, but went straight out and held Mrs. Rose by the arm. Don't worry yourself, Mrs. Rose. You think I believe all that rubbish Maisie's babbling out there? She's only doing it to worry you. I know it is not true. Maisie knows it is not true. But all she wants is to get you into a passion. Mrs. Rose allowed herself to be disarmed and led back inside. Thank you, Mr. Haynes. It is a good thing you are a gentleman like that. If was somebody else, they would believe all the lies that flowing out of that girl's mouth. But all the demons of doubt and suspicion were once more active in Haynes' mind. He had been reading when the disturbance occurred, but now he put his book on the floor beside him and sat up in the armchair, thinking hard. If all this had been more pretense, and he had been the prey of designing people, he would go back to his mother's house, send for Ella, and shut himself away from the world again. Suddenly, Mrs. Rose appeared at the doorstep. Mr. Haynes, she said, here is your $20, and she held out the 4 green notes in her hand. Take it back. You have been too much of a help in my great trouble for that child of evil to say the things she is saying. I am old enough to be your mother, Mr. Haynes, and God is my witness. She broke down, and Haynes rose to his feet and held her hand and closed her fingers over the notes. No, 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 Mrs. Rose. I believe you. I believe you absolutely. If I didn't, I wouldn't have stayed here. You have my fullest confidence, as I know I have yours. Them is noble words, said Mrs. Atwell, who had been listening just outside the door and came in to add her quota. 5 minutes after both had gone and Haynes was left alone, he wanted to tell the spiteful little bitch, yes, that's what she was, a spiteful little bitch, exactly what he thought of her. So it must amaze him talking now. He felt implicit confidence in Mrs. Rose. Now a confidence with, see like we've paused here. Okay, we're back. Okay. That pause there a little. So let me start back here. He felt a load lifted off his shoulders and oh my, I don't know why this connection keeps going on pause. Anyway, let's continue. He felt implicit confidence in Mrs. Rose now. A confidence which nothing that Maisie said would ever shake. He felt a load lifted off his shoulders and only then knew how much the good will and sincerity of number 2 meant to him. And Maisie, he felt an itching in his tongue to tell her that she was a spiteful little bitch. Never in his life had Haynes used such words or applied them to anyone, even in his mind. He had heard the expression used once by Ben months ago, and now he remembered it. How it would startle Maisie. Curious that though he was certain she was lying and wanted to curse her for it, he hadn't the slightest ill will towards her. He made up his mind to greet her with the words, if she came. It would help. But Maisie did not come. Wow. So that's the end of chapter 22. When we get back, again, when we get back on, we will read chapter 23. So our book is coming to a close, coming to a climax, yes. All right, so that's the end of chapter 22. And we'll stop there for today. So guys, thank you very much for joining me and listening to my live. Still don't see my face again this week, but when I get back on, definitely you will be able to see my face. So thank you for joining me. Have a productive and awesome week, and be careful out there. Remember to like, subscribe, and join. What am I saying? Like, yeah, join too. Like, subscribe, and share. So that's Karen Vibes on YouTube. All right, bye. Take care.